Yes, I picked up another computer for free on Facebook. Picked this up on Facebook for free, and I have to say I was really impressed. It came with everything: keyboard, mouse, monitor, the full lot. The guy basically said it had been in his loft for the last 5 years, and he was going to throw it in the trash if no one wanted it. So I definitely saved it. It will stop it becoming e-waste. And I've got a few ideas on what we could do with this. Let's take a look at it. Let's get it cleaned up because it's pretty disgusting. It's been in someone's loft for 5 years. And we'll see what's on there at the moment. And then I'll tell you about my plans. All right, let's get going. But before we get started, I just wanted to talk about today's sponsor, which is all of you. This is actually the first video I'm doing that is completely paid for by YouTube adverts. So all of you who have been watching my videos and showing that support, thank you so much. You are the official sponsors of today's video. All right, so I've taken the side off, and what we actually have is a Packard Bell iMedia PC. It has a disk drive, it has a range of ports along the top, and it does boast graphics by NVIDIA. We'll get into that later. And the AMD Athlon X3. This is a 3-core CPU, which is kind of cool. And it does come with Windows 7. Now, as far as Windows 7 goes, this is probably not going to be the best machine. But that's not what we're going to install on here. And from the title of the video, you probably already know what we're going to install. Taking a look at it more generally, you can see it's pretty groggy, and inside is no better. It is definitely pretty dusty and grim in there. So before we get it started up, I'm going to take this thing apart. We're going to give it a good clean, and then we're going to get the monitor and everything set up with it and see what it's like. Right, everything is now cleaned up and a little bit less filthy. And I've also given it a good blowout inside, so we're ready to go. This is the little monitor that came with the computer. It's an LG. I'm not sure if it would have actually been bundled with the computer or it was bought separately. A very generic keyboard, which is missing its like riser clips on the back, so it's pretty naff, to be honest. We'll see if it works. And then, funnily enough, a Dell mouse. So that definitely didn't come with it, but still, nonetheless, that's what they gave me. I also got some speakers as well, which is kind of cool. But yeah, let's boot it up and let's see if it works. We'll see if I can get screen capturing working as well. It's booting. That is a great sign. Okay, and it's booting into Windows 7 as well. Right, I'm going to let it boot up and we'll see where we get to. Alright, so that took an embarrassingly long time to boot up. But we do have screen recording working, and we are, to the desktop, immediately greeted by Norton spam. This is peak era of computers being filled with absolute rubbish when they were new. The person that had it before me did actually say that they'd wiped it and started a refresh and done a new install, which they had. This is exactly how it came, and in fact you can see that it's still installing more crap because I've left this running for a while, but it's still going. There's still more rubbish for it to install before it is done, which is shocking, considering that this machine already at the time probably wasn't the best for Windows 7 anyway. The fact they put so much rubbish on these machines, it just made them completely bogged down. I mean, look at all this stuff like eBay, Microsoft, disk cloning, Norton stuff, Photoshop, and it's still installing Windows Live Essentials, and more to come, I'm sure. So yeah, not a great start. It doesn't help, of course, as well that it does have a spinning drive in it. There is no SSD here. But anyway, let's take a look and see what hardware we're actually working with here. We can see from in here that, where are we? In here, So we do have 3 gigs of RAM, so not the worst. And as you can see, we have this very fun 3-core CPU. Let's dig into some more information about the devices. Oh, this keyboard does work, but it is the spongiest thing I've ever typed on. Unfortunately, I think this will be going to the great dump in the sky. But the rest of it, so far so good. The monitor's pretty good as well. There's no dead pixels that I can see. It's a small monitor, but this could actually be quite useful as an upgrade for my current Windows XP monitor, which has got a dead spot in it, and it's getting quite annoying. But anyway, this is what we have here. So as you can see, we do have graphics by NVIDIA. It's the GeForce 9200, which, if memory serves me right, is an incredibly terrible embedded graphics chipset. It is nothing to write home about, and certainly not worth anything. It's certainly not worth putting the label on the front of the box, to be honest. Other than that, a processor is the Athon X3 425. So I'm pretty sure this is on the lower end of these 3-core processors, but nonetheless, we've got 3 cores. That's not bad. This was definitely an era where companies were still experimenting with the right core configuration for desktop CPUs. They've kind of now settled down a bit with that, like quad-core. You do get 6-core and then 8-core and beyond. But yeah, this was definitely some odd times for this. And that's kind of it, really. Let's have a look at what the hard drive is. It's still installing crap. Let's have a look at what the hard drive is. Aha, of course. Again, something that was happening a lot at this time, splitting the hard drive into 2 partitions, so you had a C drive and a D drive. I've never actually figured out why they did this. I don't know if anyone can comment down below as to a legitimate reason that this would make sense, other than being so frustrating when your C drive was full of programs and then you had this random blank space that you couldn't really use for a whole lot. This was incredibly annoying for me back in the day. I actually remember definitely having a Dell PC that came like this. Yeah, there's already some random gumph in there, but it is a fresh install for the most part. It's still in, works 9.0, it's now installed. Oh, Jesus Christ. And as you can imagine, the more rubbish that we install, the worse it's going to get. So, what are we actually going to do with this PC? Now that we can see that it is functional, it boots up, it works, everything is being detected, what are we going to do with it? Well, as a Windows 7 machine, it's pretty weak. As it stands as well, it doesn't actually have a dedicated graphics card. There are 2 full-height PCIe slots on this machine. Although, of course, the full X16 slot is the bottom slot, so you can't get a dual slot card in there. We will have to stick with a single slot card, but we're going to put a graphics card in here, and we're actually going to downgrade it to Windows XP. I think this could be quite the overkill Windows XP machine. We're also going to install an SSD, and I know before anyone types in the comments, oh, you shouldn't use an SSD with Windows XP. Yeah, you definitely can now. They are cheap enough and last long enough that things like not having trim support does not matter. Yes, your performance is going to be worse compared to a more modern operating system, but the performance is still going to be significantly better than any spinning drive you can get. So if you have a machine that's SATA and you want to install Windows XP on it, put an SSD in there if you want to go a bit overkill. My current Windows XP gaming machine doesn't have that, but that's because that machine was really built to be what it would be like to game in that day. What we're going to do with this machine, we're going to go overkill. We're going to get one of the most modern graphics cards that we can get that still has Windows XP driver support and is single slot, and we are going to install an SSD on here. And I think with that, the 3 gig of RAM that we have installed, the 3-core processor that we have, this is going to be a really fun overkill Windows XP machine. So, before we get started, because I am recording this in the middle of that weird week between Christmas and New Year's, I don't actually have the graphics card yet. So what we're going to do is we are going to get the SSD installed, and we are going to get Windows XP installed on here as it stands. Hopefully then through the magic of editing, the graphics card will be here and we can get that installed, and then we can try and play some games on what is going to be quite the overkill for XP, I'm pretty sure. All right, let's get into it. Let's get the side off. Now this is quite a compact case, so things are a bit funky inside, but let's have a look. So off we come. And yeah, as you can see, it's pretty tight in here. So what you've actually got is this bracket holding the power supply, which is here in place. I'm not sure if I can show you, but down here you've got your PCI slots, and yes, there is full length on the bottom. So we're going to need a nice single slot card, which could be interesting. We'll try that out. There is a 1X slot as well in there above if we wanted to add something else in here. Okay, so this kind of has to come out to be able to do anything, and then the hard drive is literally underneath the bracket here. So we'll need to remove this, and then we can get to the hard drive. Now hopefully, we just unplug the power to that. Hopefully we can kind of just move this up and out of the way without unplugging anything else. Yeah, that kind of works, other than the fact that you now can't see anything. Nonetheless, let's get the hard drive out and we'll go from there. Spin it a bit around, mainly because I need to be able to get into this. So down here is a screw, which I think this whole then caddy comes out. Let's have a look, shall we? Oh, and I lost the screw. Oh, of course. Thank goodness for magnetic screw pieces. And then this must come out. Oh yeah, literally like that. And there we go. There is our 320 gigabyte Seagate drive. Also nice and dusty. Not a bad little drive, but if we're going for overkill, we need to swap this out for an SSD. So I'm going to get this out of this caddy, and then we'll see if we can mount the SSD somehow in here. Right, so that's the bay, the drive removed. Now I think what we should be able to do is kind of use two of the mounts to screw this. No, because only one of them lines up. So we're going to probably have to screw this in just using one screw. Okay, not the securest thing in the world, but let's be fair, it's an SSD, there's no moving parts. It'll work, it'll work. Alright, so that's our SSD in the mount. It is only using the one screw, but you know, it's in there pretty sturdily. Like it's not going anywhere. So for all intents and purposes, that'll be fine. Yes, let's get this back in here. It's particularly painful to get back in there, but it is now in place. So we can plug back in our SATA cable. Oh, and then we should be able to get this back on its rail like that, and then we've got the power for the SSD there, like so. There we go, we are back together. Let's get the side on and let's get XP installed. And this is of course where things started to get fun. Windows XP installations, it's always quite an interesting experience, particularly if you're trying to install it on hardware that is kind of newer than Windows XP really likes. So I started off with my normal Windows XP Service Pack 3 install disk just to try and see if we would get lucky with the standard install, and it blue screened. Okay, fine. We will try my next suggestion, which is Windows XP Integral Edition. Essentially, Windows XP plus more recent updates and drivers. So we tried that, and it blue screened. Brilliant, we're going really well. Okay, fine. I will try, instead of doing it via a CD, I will try booting from USB. Ventoy to the rescue. Again, brilliant tool for booting ISOs. And it crashed. Blue screened. Going really well. Okay, fine. We'll try Integral Edition via Ventoy and USB. And Aircraft. Okay, so at this point I was getting quite frustrated, as you can probably imagine. So I thought, fine, let's try and do it onto the original hard drive. Maybe there's something wrong with the SSD. Lo and behold, using the Windows XP Integral Edition on a disk, it started up perfectly fine, and we were straight into the Windows XP installation process, which is so very frustrating. Got it to install on the original hard drive, which obviously isn't what we actually end game here. So once that was all installed, and it was quite a long install process, not going to bore you with the whole thing, but it does install everything and lots of extra bits and pieces as well. Once that was installed, I tried to boot up a live CD of Ubuntu so I could clone the hard drive to the SSD. And that wouldn't boot either. Oh, I was having a fun day, let's put it that way. I did, in the end, manage to get a version of Gparted Live to at least boot to the command line. I think there were some issues with that pesky GeForce chipset, but I managed to get to the command line and was able to then clone the hard drive to the SSD. This was kind of my final attempt, hope that once the disk was cloned it would still boot. So it's a few days later now, but the SSD has been cloned over and it works perfectly. In fact, it boots up quicker than I was kind of imagining. Windows XP on an SSD is lovely. Yes, you're going to lose some speed because of trim. Yes, it's going to reduce the life of your SSD. No, it's not really going to be an issue considering the durability of SSDs these days. So that's the first modification for this system done. We also went with, in the end, Windows Integral Edition. Basically, all it is Windows XP with all the latest updates for Windows XP, a bunch of extra drivers, loads of other extra bits just kind of included. I find that sometimes I need to use it. I prefer not to because it includes lots of extra stuff, which for most part you're not going to need. But sometimes there will be drivers that are hard to find that are included. So that's good at least. And now that means on to the most important part. Like I said, it's been a few more days and the postman has been, and the graphics card is now here. Now we really did have a difficult job finding a good graphics card. If you're going to have a ultimate Windows XP machine, you've got to have a good graphics card. That's going to be the integral part of this. We have a 3-core processor, so I mean, as far as XP goes, you only really need a dual core to be ultimate. So we've got that covered. We have 3 gig of RAM. Well, this is a 32-bit version of Windows, so it's not really going to use much more than 3 gig anyway. That's that sorted. Hard drive is an SSD. That's that sorted. Graphics card. Well, the problem, of course, arises with the fact that we have to find something that's single slot, as new as possible, but still has Windows XP driver support. And in the end, we landed on this little non-assuming card here. It is a NVIDIA 645, which is an odd card. It's actually an OEM card. This is actually from a Dell system. You've got DVI, HDMI, and DisplayPort out. And it's actually a pretty capable card. 1 gigabyte of GDR5, I believe, RAM, graphics memory. We'll check that out. It's got a single slot design, including the cooler, so it will fit into our slot. It's pretty low profile in terms of everything about it. And just generally, yeah, it's a great little card for what we want. It's quite modern, but it does still have Windows XP driver support. So let's get this installed and let's see what we can do. And of course, let's run some games. So we are all good to go and all set up. The machine has given me a few little problems when we were getting drivers installed. It did blue screen a couple of times, but it seems to have stabilized. And as we can see, if we check in GPU Z, we do have our 645 installed. How 645, 645? I don't know. Anyway, it's installed and it's set up. Like I say, released in 2013, so much later than Windows XP, but it still has Windows XP driver support and a single slot and it doesn't require any additional power. Perfect card for this build. We do have quite a lot more power than, for example, the card that's in my normal XP build, but we do have a full gigabyte of GDDR5. I was correct. Yeah, this is quite a nice single slot, low power card for this purposes. I also was very impressed by the amount of things that the drivers just worked. I don't know if that's just because they were included in the Integral Edition of Windows XP, but the only things I had to install drivers for was the NVIDIA chipset on the motherboard, which handled Ethernet and then some of the bus stuff as well. So that was all installed in one driver package. The audio chipset as well, I had to install the drivers for that. And then the NVIDIA drivers for the graphics card, and we were good to go. Everything is recognized by the system, everything is working. Very, very impressed. But that's not what we care about. What we care about is gaming performance. So let's get into it, let's check it out. And yes, we will be deciding, can this machine play Crysis? All right, first up, it's got to be Unreal Tournament 2004. Still one of my favorite games from the 2000s. Let's give it a go and see what we can do. Kind of set a nice baseline for this system. So in terms of graphics settings, we have it running at its highest kind of setted resolution. This is all being screen captured over HDMI, I should say. And we have all highest settings in general. Also using MSI Afterburner, finally managed to find an older version of it that works with XP. So we'll be able to get some decent stats out of it. So jumping into a quick onslaught match, and we can definitely see that this is no problem at all for this system. We're running well over 100 frames per second at the, like I said, full resolution that this game supports and all highest settings. The graphics card is barely using 20% of its capability. Yeah, in general, we are just no problem with this at all. This is a pretty nice kind of way to play this game. It's fully maxed out. I love this game. I will just note as well, it's good to see that the kind of temperatures are maintaining pretty good. Even the GPU is under 50C. Okay, it's not being fully utilized, but we are getting decent utilization on the CPU. You can see it's actually making use of some of those cores to do different things, which is cool. I should imagine the game is running on one core. But anyway, let's get on to our next game. Next up, it's got to be Doom 3, another absolute classic for the time period. And I have a feeling we'll have no problem playing this one at all either. Again, this is running at the game's top highest settings, ultra quality, highest resolution, and good to go. So let's check it out. I always forget just how dark this game actually is, but playing on the full settings, at the highest resolution, getting a pretty smooth 60 frames per second. Let's just get inside where it's a little bit more lit up.
This will only take a second. Okay, let me get this started. You're gonna need to hold still. Moving around only makes the test take longer. Alright, bioscan looks good. You're cleared for entry.
And yeah, this is as smooth as butter. This is a great example of how a game should be running when you're pushing it to its max. But again, not really much of a challenge. I think there's a few more things we should try. Next up, it's got to be Command & Conquer 3. This was a game that I played to death. And is one that doesn't work very well on my current Windows XP machine. It's definitely slightly more demanding, certainly as soon as you whack up the resolution or try and use some of those higher graphics settings. Let's see what this can handle. So again, here we are going for absolute full settings that we can. We're running at full 1080p here and ultra settings across the board. Let's check it out. And as I expected, there is no problem at all playing this. This game looks really quite nice, I must admit. It's still quite a nice game to play in 2025, well, 2025 now. And yeah, smooth 30 frames per second. I have a feeling this game is locked to 30 frames per second. There is no option for VSync, and I just get that feeling like does just seem to be what's going on here. And it feels good at that frame rate. It's not a game that really benefits from super high frame rates. You can see that there's still a lot of graphics capability being unused, and the CPU isn't really hurting that much, even with all of those kind of simulations and things going on that tends to be more CPU heavy than anything else. Still getting very good temperatures as well. This is brilliant. This makes for very nice gameplay. I really need to replay this game. I loved this game. Okay, on for the finale. And as for the finale, there is only one thing that we could possibly play, and that has got to be Crysis. Can this ultimate XP machine play Crysis? Because obviously, after all, if it can't, it is not an ultimate XP machine. Let's take a look. So for graphics settings, we again have it set at full HD 1080p. Absolute overkill for back in the Windows XP day. No one was playing at 1080p then, but we are now. And if we check on the advanced settings, we have full high settings across the board. It won't let me set very high for some reason. I don't know if I needed to install something extra for that. I feel like that was a thing, but high across the board. Let's check it out.
Aztec, report.
And here we go. We have Crysis running. We're getting around 35, 40 frames per second. You can definitely see this is hitting that graphics card hard. We are at 99% utilization, and the temperature's raising up a little bit. But that's what Crysis is all about. This was the ultimate machine testing benchmark in the back in the day. This is playing really nicely. It's a smooth frame rate. I reckon you'd only need to kind of lower the settings just a little bit if you wanted a higher frame rate. But again, it's not needed. It's smooth. It's consistent, and yeah, I'm kind of impressed. The load is not all that bad on the system. That graphics card is taking the brunt of it. And I will say, if we had the space, if we had a dual slot space, or if I could find one, I would have definitely gone for the GTX 750 Ti. That seems to be the kind of absolute sweet spot for the most overkill graphics cards you can get that still has Windows XP support. But unfortunately, I couldn't find any single slot models, and looking online, it suggested they did exist, but I couldn't find any more, and obviously, you're not buying them new anymore. So the only ones I could find were dual slot, which we can't use in this system. So we've taken kind of a bit of a downgrade, but nonetheless, this is brilliant. It works so well, and yeah, we can play Crysis. And there you have it. That is the Ultimate Edition Windows XP build. I'm really happy with this. I'm really happy we were able to save a machine from landfill. That was always a big thing for me. Put some life in this old machine. As a Windows 7 machine, pretty weak, to be honest. Not the best, but as a Windows XP machine, this thing flies. Yeah, I'm in love with it. However, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to keep it. I just don't have the space at the moment. So what I will be doing is I'm going to be putting this one up on eBay for auction. In fact, the auction will be live as this video goes live. So if you're in the UK and you would like a pretty damn good Windows XP gaming machine and you'd like to support the channel, please do go check that out. All in all, the upgrades cost me around £70. It was about £40 for the SSD and about £30 for the graphics cards. So I'd love to be able to pass this on to someone who is going to use it, going to love it, going to enjoy it. It's a great small build and it's really perfect for XP. But there we have it. I hope you have enjoyed this video. I know I've enjoyed making it. It's been a real fun one. I love these build videos and I know you guys do too. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it and I will see you again very, very soon for another video. Bye for now.